Wednesday night, April 7th, 2021. As we know, tonight, many people are having Yom HaShoah programs. And next week in the state of Israel, we'll be celebrating Yom Hag HaAtzmaut Israel. I wanted to find a topic that bridges the gap between both Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut. And I found an interesting teshubah from Rabbi Yaaqob Moshe Toledano, who lived from 1880 to 1960. And his later years, after so many different rabbinical positions, he was minister of religion for the state of Israel. This is from his book, Yam HaGadol, published in Cairo in 1931. Keep in mind, so being 1931, it's not only before the state of Israel's creation, it's also before the Holocaust. And this is the final teshubah in this volume. Siman Saddi Zayin, you have it in front of you. And here's the she'elah. נשאלתי מאחד מדידיי לבאר בכלל מצוות יישוב ארץ ישראל בזמן הזה, חייבים כל ישראל להשתדל בכיבוש הארץ בכל מיני האמצעים האפשריים. וכן, אם אין איסור ללמד בני ישראל חשת תכסיסי גיבורה וסדרי הגנה, להילחם ולעמוד על נפשם נגד סורריהם ומבקשי רעתם לעת הסורף. So I was asked a question by one of my friends to explain if within the context of the mitzvah of settling the land of Israel nowadays, is it also obligatory on every Jew to be involved in fact, conquering the land through any means possible? And also, that being said, would it be asur, would it be forbidden to teach Bnei Israel all types of methods of defense, using ammunition, using whatever means possible to defend themselves and to fight and to defend themselves from all enemies whenever necessary? Now, obviously, this is a very powerful question. Remember, this is prior to the Holocaust. And if people actually thought about this question as the Holocaust started, and they were aware of the answer and they were prepared, Holocaust may have ended up differently. If they looked at this question prior to the creation of the state, and not that they weren't prepared, maybe if they were better prepared, also things may have worked out a little bit differently. In any case, let's look at his teshubah. We may get into points where we're going to have a little bit of a difficulty, but we'll try to figure it out together. Teshubah. לא רציתי לנגוע בפרט כזה מכמה טעמים, because I didn't want to answer this question. I didn't want to get into it for a number of reasons. ולולא שהשואל אלסני לזה, ולולא שראיתי גם כן שרבים הם מגדולי רבנינו בדורות הקודמים ובדורנו זה, טעו והטעו את בני עמנו ההמון הפשוט לחשוב שכל זמן שאנו בגלות החל הזה, אסור לנו להרים ראש, כי אם מצווה עלינו לכפוף את עצמנו לכל עריס ומושל ולתת יביינו למכים ולחיינו למורתים. כאילו הותר דם ישראל וכאילו כך נגזר מלפניו יתברך לתת למשיסה יעקב וישראל בוזזים. Wow. I didn't want to get into this question. And if it wasn't for the person who asked me, who kept pushing me, and then that I saw that many of our leaders, many of our rabbis in earlier generations and in this generation made a mistake and have caused others to be mistaken, to make Jewish people en masse think that at any point that we are in the Galut, it is forbidden for a Jew to lift his head, and rather it's a mitzvah for us to lower our heads to any tyrant, to any dictator, and to give our body to be beaten up and our faces to be slapped, as if Jewish blood is cheap, and as if God decreed that Jews are supposed to be downtrodden. וחשבו בדעתם שבכלל גזירת הגלות ושעבוד מלכויות, העבדות והשפלות, ושזהו בכלל קידוש השם של ייהרג ואל יעבור, לוותר על חיי האיש היהודי ולהימסר כעבדים וכשבויי חרב ביד שרי ישראל, אף כשיש אפשרות להתייסר נגדם ולהשיב להם כרעתם. As if this is a decree from on high, from God, that once we're in the Galut, and part of being in the Galut is to be subservient to the non-Jewish rulers and kingdoms. And yes, we are belittled in a sense, but they think that's actually part of Kiddush Hashem to be murdered and to give up on life, that Jewish life means nothing, and just give up as if we're a slave that's owned to be destroyed. Okay, as if we're captives of war for them to play with us as they will. Any enemy, okay, even if we have the ability to stand up against them and to hit them back. No, we can't do that. You have to stand back, and put down our arms and let them do whatever they want to us. I said, I have to open my mouth. I can't stand back. I can't shut up. I have to, I'm sorry, with all dignity, with all respect to them, I can't, just sit back and do nothing about it. This attitude, this stance has caused not only individual people to die, it has caused annihilation of entire communities. And there were great many communities with many, many people in them that they could have. And because of their sheer numbers, they could have saved themselves from destruction. If only their rabbis taught them that they have to defend themselves, but rather the rabbis taught them, sit back like sheep going to the slaughterhouse. Like we have the deen from the Torah, somebody that comes to kill you, you have to rise up and kill him first. But they didn't do that. Rather, they found a way to say, no, this is the deen, this is the judgment upon us, and it's justified. And they gave themselves up to the slaughterhouse. الدعاء النفسدت וההרגל הגלותי הנזכר לחשוב את עצמם כאבן דומם וזוחלי עפר וכן ואפס. And it has created this mindset over the course of generations for us to look at ourselves as worthless, just at best rocks. We're nothing. We're like dust, mud. מבלי להבין ולהשכיל שכל מה שנכתב בתורה ובנביאים ובתלמוד דברים כאלו כמו ורדו בכם שונאיכם, והבאתים מורך בלבבם, והיית רך עשוק ורסוס כל הימים, ונתן לך לב רגז, הם רק בתור קללות ועונש שעה, ולא חיובים וגזרות. And all these decrees, if you will, or statements in the Torah that are considered as curses upon us, these rabbis and leaders have taken them as if they are obligatory and they are gezerot, decrees upon us. But they're not. They were meant to be strictly curses and punishments for the moment, not a decree for life. כמו יתר הקללות שם, שכולם בשעתם היו, בחמנת השם על ישראל ומהבתו אותם. These are only temporary curses and decrees of punishment on Am Yisrael, so they wouldn't do the wrong thing, because Hashem loved them, not to hurt the people forever and ever. וכמו יכיכה אדוני בקדחת ובחרחר, ושברי לחם מטה לחם, ואכלתם בשר ביניכם, הוא ילוך ואתה לא תראונו, שכולם יש ירעו פעם ולא ירעו עוד, ויש שלא היו כלל, ולא נאמרו כגזרה קיימת חלילה וחס. וככה גם אותם הדברים שבתנ"ך המראים על השתעבדות ישראל והשפלתם בגלות, אינם אלא כללות אשר השם והנביאים איימו בהם על עם ישראל כדי לראות אחרי השם ותורתו. These are just things that the Nebi'im said that Hashem put in their mouths to say, to wake up the people, to shake them up, but not to say this is what God's going to be doing to you forever. ולא שישראל מחויבים עצמם להתנהג בהם למסור עצמם ולהיות למרמס חלילה וחס לפני ממשלות או עמים אחרים. And never was it a decree for us to do these things to ourselves, to give ourselves up to all types of murderous rulers. וזהו שאמרו רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה בכתובות חוף יוד א'. Now, before we get into this part, there is something which personally I was not familiar with until a few days ago. I heard about it, but I really never looked at it. There is, in this Gemara in Masechet Ketubot, on page 111, there are 3 oaths, 3 swears, 3 shabu'ot, that God made Israel swear. And this seems to be the basis of the anti-Zionistic stance of many religious Jews. And the reason I looked into it this week, because I was reading about Hakham Mordechai Atiyah alayhi shalom, who was great Hakham. He really was a great Hakham. All his books talk about returning to Eretz Israel, to making Aliyah, to building up the country. He was definitely one of the greatest Syrian Zionist rabbis that ever lived. And like I said, every one of his books is strictly about this topic. But he has one book called Sod HaShibu'ah, where he explains this section of Masechet Ketubot and explains what these Shibu'ot really are and what they're meant to be, how they're meant to be understood, how they've been misunderstood. And it's a fantastic work. Supposedly when he wrote this work and he went to Rabbi Kook, not Rabbi Abraham Ishaq Cohen Kook, but to Rabbi Shvi Kook, I believe. He found him he was going to the yeshiva to Merkaz Arab to give it to him, and he found him on the street, and he gave it to him, and Rabbi Kook glanced at it and what the topic was, and Rabbi Kook started dancing in the street, said, finally, somebody has redeemed Am Yisrael. That's how special this work was. And hopefully we'll have a chance to study that also in the near future. It's something I want to look into more. I need to understand it better, because I'm not well-versed in it yet. But just show you who we're talking about. We spoke about Rabbi Atiyah last year when we spoke about Yom HaAsmaut. This is what Hakham Atiyah looks like. He was a big Mikubal as well. But everything he wrote about was about Eretz Israel and about Jews moving back there. Anyway, so there is this section in Masechet Ketubot on page 111. Gimel Shabuot תכתיבי בשיר השירים. למה אחד שלא יעלו ישראל בחומה, ואחד שהשביע הקדוש ברוך הוא את ישראל, שלא ימרדו באומות, ואחד שהשביע הקדוש ברוך הוא את האומות, שלא ישתעבדו בהם יותר מדי. So you have these three swears, and you should really look them up. Look it up on Wikipedia under the title Three Oaths. Okay, because I was looking for something in English to, to refer people to if they weren't familiar with it, because I myself was not very familiar with it. And you'll see it on Wikipedia, which gives you a basic understanding of what these three oaths are. And the pasuk in Shir Shirim that all this entire area is based upon, and that first of all you have that Bnei Yisrael shouldn't basically climb the wall. In other words, try to take over the land, and that Bnei Yisrael should not rebel against other nations. And the third one, that the nations of the world should not overly subjugate the Jewish people. הנה, שהשבועה הייתה רק שלא ימרדו, או שלא ימרודו. So the shibua was that the people should not rebel. The Jewish people should not rebel. לא שיהיו שפלים ונבזים לפני האומות. Not that they should be subservient to the other nations. ואף בגלות מצרים שנאמר בה ועבדום ועינו אותם בדרך גזרה וחיוב. And even when they were in slavery in Egypt, Pasuk says ועבדום ועינו אותם, enslave them and cause them to suffer. And it was a derech of gezerah v'hiyub, right? It was a decree and it was an obligation. Amru Rabboteinu zichronam lebracha shekoshi hashibud hishlim minyan ha'arba me'od shana. Because the type of shi'bud, the type of servitude they put Bnei Yisrael into was much harsher than expected, it ended up completing the 400-year period in a period of just 210 years. וגם אז ראינו שמשה רבנו עליו השלום, כשראה איש מצרי מכה איש עברי מאחיו על מגן, הרג אותו, כי ידע שאין זה בכלל השעבוד. Therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu saw that the Egyptian taskmaster was whipping, if you will, hitting the Jewish slave in a over aggressive fashion, Moshe Rabbeinu hit him and ended up killing him because he knew this was not part of the sha'ibud. This was not part of the servitude Bnei Yisrael was supposed to be under. V'chein begalut Yisrael befaras, and when Bnei Yisrael was in exile in Persia, kishera'u Esther Mordechai gizerat Haman leharog u'lashmid. Okay, when they saw the gizerah, the decree of Haman to utterly annihilate the Jewish nation, lo hishtadelu lebatel hagizerah davka. They did not work to stop this gizerah, this decree. And again, hipilu pahdam al hasuririm lehashib makkah al makkehem bi'asu bisonehem kisonam. It wasn't enough for them to repeal the gizerah, but rather they wanted to instill the same fear on these non-Jews, okay, on the Persians and the others, that they instilled upon Am Yisrael. V'gam begalut Sefarad, and even when they were in Spain, ידוע שהרב השר אברבנאל, אוקיי? תקס עיסה עם גדולי ישראל בספרד, איך להתנגד לסורריהם ולהילחם נגדם לולא שהופרעה עשתם על ידי מומר אחד שגילה הסוד. Abarbanel and the other great leaders were working on a plan to basically rebel against the Spanish royals, against Ferdinand and Isabella, okay, and to change the tide of things. But they had a mole in their midst who went and told the Spanish royals what was going on, and then things turned on them. And the history of what happened with the Romans after the, what do you call it, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, Israel, Babel, Misraim, Kernekia, Ve'od. Okay, throughout history, things happened. Yidu'im him kibar. They're all well known. Shirubam hayu lo mered be'omot. We never rebelled against the people. Ela mirob al she'etidu alehim. Okay, rather they were coming down upon us hard and harder every time. Began bisman ha'amuraim v'ha'geonim ve'ad giru sefarad. Even at the time of the Amuraim, the Geonim, and until the time of the expulsion from Spain. Gedolei Yisrael hasu al kiboda mechboda kihilot. The great leaders of Am Yisrael always put their honor aside, and they put down the honor of Am Yisrael. But whenever it was within their ability, they were, they stood up for themselves. Verad besorfat, Ashkenaz, veRusia, ishpilu asmam kolkach. Rather, only in Spain, in Germany, and in Russia did they lower and degrade themselves so much. They never, ever attempted to defend themselves. And in later generations, and our later times, in other words, let's say he's talking about the last 400 years from when he was writing this, it became the style, unfortunately, among the Sephardim as well, in Morocco, in Persia, and in Turkey, and other places as well. Kisablu bidumiyah hakol b'kiyum b'asman b'avontim harabim hapasuk b'yish'ayanun alef asher amiru l'mshikha shihai b'na'abora. I'm not familiar with the pasuk. B'tasimi ke'ez givecha v'chus l'oberim. Strong pasuk. Okay. So basically, they gave up on everything. And go and read the books of the different Hachamim that gave speeches about these things. And in the books of Mosseri, you see that they tell you to go and, allow yourself to be degraded and downtrodden and accept all sorts of bodily harm. Because for some reason they thought this is part of the galut, or even this is a form of being anav. عاد شوكشا لإيز محبرين كنسكير دعيل على يعقوب أبينو شامار بحربي وبقشتي وعلى كليب شامار كوحي كوحي حتى شيخ صديقين كإلو بارو بجبورتام كإلو يسول لبار إسرائيل يتبائر بجبورة, as if it would be forbidden for a Jewish person to take pride in what they call in being heroic and being strong. Rather always be, lowly. فإيم شيخو ما شكاتوه وما شأمروا ربوتين مرخا بشبات صدي بيت أنا شيخنا شوراء إلا الحخام جبور وعشير. But did they all forget? Masechet Shabbat, it says the Shekhinah only rests upon somebody who is Hacham, Gibor, ve'ashir. Not just Hacham, not just Ashir, but he has to be Hacham, he has to be Gibor, he has to be mighty, ve'ashir. ואפילו בזמן התלמוד שהיו גם כן בגלות בשעבוד התפארו בגבורה כריש לקיש ורבי אבהו וזולתם. If you go and study the Gemara, you see the major masters, the Hachamim in the Gemara, people like Rish Lakish and Rabbi Abhu, they were mighty people. ومكرم عليه أدونai عوز لعمو يتيد. Okay? God gives oz, he gives strength, he gives might to his nation. مش كتوب نفسك عفا لخلق ديه بخيم مدوت عنفاخ نعاش بحجر ربوتين زخران برخاء إن كذنا إلا كالبيع حبيرين وأناشيم هم موسريين. When we talk about being anav, okay, and we say let my soul be my nefesh be like afar, like dust, all that's talking about towards your friends, towards your fellow man, people that have morals and ethics like you. And don't be, haughty and full of pride. And not to stand up among them. Oh, look how great I am. But never to put yourself down and destroy yourself. Am Yisrael was never commanded to act like that. והגלות שנגזרה עלינו הנה כי אם שנהיה לזרים ומטולטלים מארץ לארץ. The gizera that we have upon us was that we're going to be nomadic. We're not going to have a place to settle. We're going to constantly be pushed from one place to another. ולשמע לפיקודות הממשלות עשיות לפי החוק והנימוס ולשלם מיסים חיובי בזה. And we're going to be subject to the whims of the different rulers. I'm going to have to pay all different types of taxes and what have you. But not that we should be, constantly hurt and subjugated and suffering. لربي زكريا بن أبكيلاس حريبة إدبتين. So we know the famous story that in the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, that this particular Rabbi Zechariah ben Abkilas, because he was so humble and he was afraid for anything to go a certain way, he kept, he wouldn't look the other way. He wouldn't allow certain things to go on. And because of that, the Beit HaMikdash ended up being destroyed because he never let anybody do something that would basically defend us. So the whole story about the Roman who brought the sheep, who cut the lip, whatever. We're not going to get into the whole story from the Gemara. We've talked about it Tisha B'Av time. Anyway, שענבה פסולה זו שקבעוها גדולי ישראל בלב ההמון גרמה לגלות יותר מדי. This false anava, okay, that has been basically instilled within the heart of the Jewish masses by the Gedulim of Israel, is what has caused a galut for far too long, that is far too destructive, and it has basically destroyed us. ובעווניה הרבים עינינו ראו זאת גם פה בארץ הקודש מקרוב, שבמהומות ופרעות שהיו בשנת תרפ"ט. So here, even in Israel, in 1929, we know what happened, okay, like the Hebron massacre, for example. גדל מספר ההרוגים מאחינו בעיני הישיבות ודלת העם שחונכו והשכילו בכך להיעלב ולהסתחף להיות יד כל בם. What happened in Hebron? The Arabs decided to get up and start massacring, and the Jews sat back. They didn't lift the arm, they didn't fight back. Okay, you want to kill us, kill us. And these were B'nai Yeshivot. You would think they know Torah, they should know better. But no, that's not the case. So this is what's going on so far in the mind of Rabbi Toledano. And he's painting a very, very clear picture of our history. And it hurts. It hurts a lot. But he has to lay the foundation. And again, like I said before, imagine every Jew who read this prior to the Holocaust. how different the Holocaust may have ended up. Maybe there would never been a Holocaust. Maybe, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising would have happened throughout Europe and any place the Nazis went. והנה הערכתי כיסא בנושא זה, ויש לי עוד להביע על זה כמה הוכחות וראיות מדברי רבותינו ורבותינו. Because okay, I'm blabbing a lot over here, but I still have so many more proofs from the words of our Nebi'im and our Hachamim. Because but I can keep writing and writing and I won't have enough ink and paper. ומכלל דברינו אלה אתה מוסר תשובה לשאלת השואל השני. And from what I'm saying, you automatically find a response to the question. אם אין איסור ללמד את בני ישראל קשת תכסיסי גיבורה בסדרי הגנה וכו'. It wouldn't be forbidden to teach self-defense, to teach the usage of ammunition and arms. שעל פי האמור, לא בלבד שאין איסור בדבר, אלא גם מצווה וחובה על כל גדולי ישראל ומנהיגיו לקבוע לימודים כאלה בבתי התלמוד תורה והישיבות שעה קבועה ליום. You hear what Rabbi Toledano is telling you? Not only is it not asur, okay? Rather, it's a mizvah and it's a hobah. Mizvah and obligation, a command and an obligation upon every gadol of Yisrael and every manhi, every leader, every hacham, okay? Anybody who has that power to establish limudim, okay? These types of educational courses in the Talmud Torah and in the yeshivot for one established hour every day. Every day you have 1 hour of defense, 1 hour of ammunition, 1 hour of shooting range, 1 hour of whatever it may be. Every day in the yeshivot, in the Talmud Torah. למען יהיו התלמידים והבחורים מוכרים לקרב על כל צרה שלא תבוא. Therefore, the Talmidim and the Bahurim will be ready at any moment, at any time, for any tragedy that should never befall us. בשבח אני את פרחי הדור הזה החדש, שהעירו והתעוררו לחיות ולבבות הנתקעים. He goes, and I praise the young people of this generation, of this new generation, that have woken up and are waking up others to rekindle this thought in the hearts of those that are downtrodden, that are hurt. To gird this spirit of heroism. And to return the crown of the kabod of Am Yisrael to its former glory. Quotes the pasuk. וזה לעניות דעתי הוא בכלל מלחמת מזווה שנסתווינו עליה להגן על ישראל מיד שר. Because this is part of מלחמת מזווה. You open up Sefer HaMizvot, you open up the Torah, you open up Sefer HaChinuch, open up whatever you want. You have something called Milchemet Mizvah. Okay, a war of Mizvah. And this is part of it. And we have to prepare for it. And we have to be ready to defend Am Yisrael from any enemy. They came in this type of situation, you don't even have to go and get permission from the Sanhedrin. He goes, and even a new couple, just married, the Hatan and the Kala, they go out to defend Am Yisrael. כמו שכתב, כל זה ברמב"ם פרקי מלכות מלכים בספר החינוך מזווה ת"ת"ה, שבכלל מלחם מזווה דהחרים תחרימם הוא מלחמת עזרה לישראל מסר ושונא שבעדיהם. Part of the מלחמת מצווה is defense from any enemy. בעיין מה שכתב בלחם משנה שם, ודעתי שלמה שמה שכתוב בגמרא סוטה من ذلك, כי פליגי למיעוטי נוכרים דלליתו עליהו מור סבר רשות. היינו, כשרוצים להקדים ולהילחם נגד נוכרים שבסביבותיהם, מחשש שמא יתנפלו אחר כך עליהם. So you could even go and attack the nochrim that are around if you're concerned that maybe these nochrim are later going to turn around to attack you. בזהו דפליגי התם, ליהודה רבנן יהווה רשות או מצווה, כיוון שלא ברור שיתנפלו הנוכרים ההם עליהם. So would this be a רשות, מלחמת רשות או מלחמת מצווה? אבל הרמב"ם והחינוך האלו ושכיבה ברור להם שרוצים הנוכרים ההם לבוא לנפל עליהם. But once it becomes clear to you that these נוכרים may want to come and befall you, ובזה אף רבנן מצווה היא, then even the רבנן would be considered מצווה, דהבה להורגך, השכם להורגו. You always have to be one step ahead, planning and knowing what's going on behind the scenes. וזהו שלמדנו מהחרים את החרימים. ואין ספק שדבר זה נוהג גם לדורות. And this is something that is for all generations. And in any place, he tells you, it was not only in Eretz Israel, but in any place at any time. You as a Jew have to be ready and teach yourself or learn so you could defend yourself. And even according to the laws of whatever country you may be in, or the laws of the, or according to the deen, שניים שנתקשרו בשבועה, ואחד מהם עבר על שבועתו, השני פטור משבועתו. According to law, international law, let's have it, as well as law of the Torah, you have two people that enter into an oath between them. If one party breaks the oath, the other party is no longer obligated with that oath. So now that Ummot ha'olam, the nation of the world, broke their part of the oath, it automatically annuls the entire thing, and Am Yisrael is no longer obligated within that oath as well. כמו שכתב בירדעה, סימן ריש למד תעי וו. וראיה מאברהם ואבימלך, שאחר כך עבו הפלישתים על שבועתם ונפטרו גם ישראל, ולכן הותר לשמשון להילחם בה, כמו שכתב מפרשים שם. ואם כן, כיוון שהקדוש ברוך הוא השביע על ישראל, וגם לאומות שלא להשתעבד בהם יותר מדי, כי נזכרנו לעיל, כשהם עוברים על שבועה זו ומכבידים עולם, גם ישראל פטורים משבועתם. ואפשר שזהו כוונת רבותינו וזיכרונם ברכה במדרש שיר השירים, שנשבע למלכיות שלא יקשו עול על ישראל, שאם מקשים עול עליהם הם גורמים לקץ לבוא שלא בעונתו. דהיינו מטעם נזכר שאז אין כאן שבועה שלא לדחות לתקץ. So far, I think he's doing a beautiful job. He really explained himself very, very well. I'd like to break for comments before we continue. Rabbi Nathan, I see you flipping through your books over there. You're thinking, you're coming up with something.
My audio is not working. Could you hear me or no?
I hear you, yes.
No, my book says I'm multitasking. The pasuk that was quoted from Yeshaya Nun Aleph.
Yes, I didn't pull out a Tanakh to turn around and get one, but I'm sure you have it in front of you. I don't hear you now.
How about now?
Yes.
No.
I think every time you turn your head, we don't hear you.
1 second. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. Pasuk says, "V'samtiha biyad mogayich, asher ameru nafshech shechi v'na'avora, v'tasimi cha'aretz kavich וכחוס העובדים. Shall I
Wanna
read the
go-
English?
Yeah, please.
I will put it in the hands of your tormentors who have commanded you, get down, that we may walk over you.
Ya haram.
So that's the pasuk that he's quoting, as if now it's our commandment to do that always.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting pasuk. I need to look at it in context to get a better idea of it. But I appreciate that. Thank you. Rabbi Kasur? Yes.
Yeah, I feel a bit uncomfortable listening to the Satmar, a handbook, which apparently was taken from that Gemara, those Shavuot.
Yes.
I'd rather rely upon this pasuk: Shimon v'Levi achim, kelech Hamas mechoretehem. How about looking at the text of the Torah Shebechtav and finding sources for self-defense, rather than looking at the Gemara, which may have been said at that moment, but never was meant to be a promise, and never was meant to be forever. So I'd rather look at the Torah for cases, and I read ahead in the Teshuvah. I know Rabbi Toledano is going to come back to support this approach for sure. But I feel uncomfortable having to look at the Gemara, and you're telling us that you're going to investigate it as if it's excuse the expression, the gospel. That Gemara was meant for that moment, but is not meant as a prophecy.
So I never said that it's a gospel of any sort, but I mention it because it's brought up constantly, both by the anti-Zionists as well as the Zionists. For some reason, it has become that stepping stone to know what direction a person is going to take. That's why I mention it. And that's why, God willing, I will have the opportunity to look into it. And that when we have somebody as great as Hakham Mordechai Atiyah, who not only investigated, but he explained it in a way that it should leave no doubt in anyone's mind as to what it really means, I think that should be something very interesting to see. But definitely not a gospel, and we definitely cannot ever abandon the straight Pesukim of Torah Shebechtab. Those are, Keter Barosh, if you will. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Who else is with us here? David Batesh or Marky, any comments, please?
I signed on late, but I like what I'm hearing.
Here play out.
Joey,
Yes.
I agree with the previous speaker. I just never understood why we have to have the Gemara, why we need to rely on a Gemara to push us in that direction.
So let's all understand that we are, people that have Torah Shebechtab and Torah Sheba'al Peh, and we believe in both of them wholeheartedly. And if we have a piece of Torah Sheba'al Peh that, doesn't make sense, either it's not making sense because it's not being taught properly, or because we're not understanding it properly. We don't know we're not wearing the right lenses, to read it and to understand it.
I hope it's the latter, because
I think that's what it is, considering, like I said, let me pull out this book. It's a small booklet, and I'll be more than glad to make copies, of these pages and send it out as a PDF or any way possible for whoever, is interested to study it on their own. If you're in a rush to study it, just to see what Hakham Mordechai Atiyah has to say. So this is the pamphlet. Okay, he has a
Joey,
yes.
I sent David Batesh a link of it. that I found
Okay.
online.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Anyway, so it's a short 4.5-page introduction, and then the actual work is about 25 pages long, and they're small pages, if you see. Well, let me here. See, so they're not long pages at all. So it's the content over here that is really what we would be interested in. Whatever. If you sent them the link already, there's no reason for me to make copies. I think send the link to everybody just in case somebody's interested. And like I said, hopefully I'll have a chance to study it further. But I think it would be
Right.
something very interesting and important.
Joey, one last question. Was this rabbi in the minority of opinion in where he was coming from, or he had other people agreeing with him?
So that's a great question. Early on, when he was writing, I don't know of many, or if any, rather, rabbis were writing in such a forceful manner. Possibly the only rabbi that may have written something, and I haven't seen it yet, would have been Chief Rabbi Uziel. Okay, because he was also of the same mindset, if you will. But Rabbi Toledano, I think, has definitely written the strongest type of teshuvah. You have to keep in mind also that Rabbi Uziel was in Eretz Yisrael, and if he wrote something that, whether it was the Ottomans or the British, felt might incite a mob type mentality among the Jews, it also may not have, worked well. So Rabbi Toledano, writing in Egypt, it was a different, because he wasn't in the locale, in Eretz Israel, talking about defending Eretz Israel, it probably wasn't looked at or scrutinized the same way. So I'm not familiar with any other rabbi that wrote anything like Rabbi Toledano's work. And I've been looking around and I haven't seen references, where Rabbi Toledano was quoted or even attacked. So I think the Hachamim, who are very familiar with this teshuvah, because this particular book, Yom HaGadol of his, is quoted plenty, they decided to not touch this subject because I guess they saw that it might be a very difficult subject for them to, to grapple with. Remember, it was still early on. We're talking about this is pre-Holocaust. Okay, so let's say 1920, he's referring to the 1929 Hebron massacre. Okay, State of Israel didn't come about for another 20 years approximately. Nobody was thinking. If anything, he was, he was prophetic in what he was writing. And that he said that he praises the young people of this new generation. So obviously he's talking about the underground fighters in Israel, whether it's Palmah or the Lehi or any, or whoever it may have been. How many people are going to be writing about things like that? I don't know. You need a very, very special Talmid Hacham to really engage in such a subject and in the current events and to bring it to light for the entire halachic world to look at. But if you find something or you're able to come up with something interesting, I'd be interested to hear about it. All right. Anything else, or should we continue? All right. I guess we go on. Right, on page Kof Pe Gimel. ועתה נבוא לשאלה אחת אם יש חיוב בזמן הזה בכיבוש ארץ ישראל. Because we'll come to the first question, if there's an obligation nowadays to conquer the land of Israel. הנה ידועים הם דברי הרמב"ן בסוף ספר המצוות שהוסיף מצוות ישיבת ישראל ותמה על הרמב"ם שלא מנעה מהתרי"ג מצוות. So it's a very, very famous situation where the Ramban, okay, Moshe bar Nachman, at the end of the Sefer HaMizvot of his, includes a mitzvah of settling the land of Israel. And he basically stands in bewilderment, questioning, how could it be that the Rambam, Moshe bar Maimun, did not count this mitzvah of settling the land of Israel as one of the 613 mitzvot. ובעל מגילת אסתר תירס דלהרמב"ם אין מצווה ישיבת ישראל נוהג בזמן הזה. And whoever wrote this particular work called Megillat Esther, okay, said the Rambam didn't include it because it is not currently a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah that applies to our time. Based, and he's regarding because of that particular Gemara in Ketubot 111. ותמה על הרמב"ן שכתב שמצוות כיבוש ישראל להילחם באומות היושבים עליה בשלו להשאירה שוממת נוהג גם בזמן הזה. And this particular Hakham who wrote this book called Megillat Esther is really troubled by how could Ramban write that there is a mitzvah to conquer Israel and to go up against it and fight the people that are living there and not to leave it desolate, like it's been until now. ואין אמת שתמיהת המגן אברהם בזה על רמב"ן חזקה. I'm sorry, תמיהת מגילת אסתר בזה על רמב"ן חזקה. Because really this is a strong question. אך בזה לא יעשה ידי חובתו לתרץ דעת הרמב"ן שלא מנעה. But he also did not really explain the Rambam's position of not counting it. שאף אם לא נוהג בזמן הזה, היה לא למנותה, כמו שמנע מצוות בניין בית המקדש והמצוות תלויות בו כקורבנות וכיוצא. So even if Rambam did not want to include it as one of the mitzvot, you still had to count it, even if it's not applicable for now, in other words, you still have to count it, like talking about building the Beit HaMikdash and the Korbanot and everything else tied into it. וכבר תמו רבים על מגילת אסתר בזה. ולדעתי יש ליישב דבריו לפי מה שכתב רמב"ם בפרק ו' מהלכות בית הבחירה, שארץ ישראל נקנית תחילה על ידי כיבוש יהושע. ושגדו ישראל ממנה ביטל הכיבוש ובטלה קדושתה. וכשבא עזרא דקחה בחוזקה והחזקה לא בטלה, ולכן קידושה שנייה קידשה גם לעתיד לבוא. So very interesting how Rabbi Toledano explains it. Rabbi Toledano tells us, look at Harambah himself in Hilchot Bet HaBechira, Perek Vav, and he tells you that Israel is acquired first through kibush, okay, by conquering, and Yehoshua conquered it, and then the people of Israel were exiled. Once they were exiled, this conquering came to an end, okay, and the Kedusha came to an end with it, or was annulled, rather. When Azra Sofer came, he took Israel by force, and this force never annulled, never ended, and therefore the Kedusha that came with Azra Sofer is still there and remains there forever. Now, if that's the case, according to Rabbi Toledano, we don't have to come back and reconquer it because it's ours and the Kedusha is there. That's what I'm understanding so far. ופירש התוספות יום טוב בפרק ח' עדויות, שמכיוון שבתורה נכתב שעתידים ישראל לגלות ממנה, הרי זה כאילו הודיעה לנו שהכיבוש יתבטל ותפקע קדושתה הראשונה, מה שאין כן בית המקדש קדושתו הייתה קבועה לתמיד משום השראת שכינה שרתה בו, כמו שכתב הרמב"ם שם, ובזה שנמנו מצוות בניין בית המקדש והקורבנות ומצוות קיבועות. לא כן מצוות ישיבת ישראל שבת לקדושתה בגלות בבל והביטול מפורש בתורה כנזכר. אף שחז לה אחר כך אין זה אלא על ידי עזרא ואנשי עזרא על ידי עזרא. ואין אכן מעזרא ואילך נוהגת מצוות ישיבת ישראל לדעת הרמב"ם על איבד המגילת אסתר נזכר. והרי כדבר שהוא מדרבנן ומדרי קבלה ככל תקנות עזרא. ומתורסים בזה כמה תמיהות שתמו האחרונים על דברי המגילת אסתר ועדת הסוברים שישיבת ישראל בנושא דרבנן, ויוצאים מזה גם כן שאף שישיבת ישראל מצווה היא בתקנת עזרא ואילך, אין מצוות כיבוש נוהגת, כיוון שכיבוש ראשון בטל ועזרא עצמו לקחה רק על ידי חסדה ברישיון כורש, כמו שכתב בתוספות יום שם, ושאפי כתב במגילת אסתר הנזכרת להסתייע משבועת שלא לעלות בחומה שאין מצוות כיבוש ישראל נוהגת כעת. So basically, from what I can tell, he's trying to explain and establish that because of that first, we don't have to deal with the issue of kibush because we have Azra HaSofer taking it by force through the decree from Koresh, and it was given to him, and it was never taken away after that. And therefore, it still stands with us. But as far as the Beit HaMikdash, because the Beit HaMikdash itself was destroyed, so then Harambam had to come and re-establish the laws of building the Beit HaMikdash and the korbanot of the Beit HaMikdash. And therefore, he had to put all those down and count them as separate mitzvot. Whereas taking Israel, he doesn't have to, because it never left us. We left it, but it did not leave us. והייתי רוצה להעריף עוד בזה, אלא שבעיקר הדבר אין דברה של מגילת אסתר בפירוש דעת הרמב"ם נכונים כלל, והאמת הוא שהסברה שבלי הרמב"ם שם בתוך דברה ומה שכתב ואז תתבש כי המצווה הזאת היא במלחמת שבעה עממים וכולי עין שם, ניבא ולא ידע מה ניבא, בדעת הרמב"ם שלא מענה ישיבת ישראל מצוות עשה Okay, I think that's what it was. That's a typo. מצוות עשה בפני עצמה, וכולי עין שם. ניבא ולא ידע מניבא בדעת הרמב"ם שלא מהו. אוקיי, מפני שסובר שהיא נכללת במצוות החלמת שבעה עממים והיא חלק ממנה. He considers that Harambam is looking at the mitzvah of Yeshivat Israel, of settling the land of Israel, is part of getting rid of the 7 nations. Okay, and it's all tied in together. ומצאנו כעין זה בהרבה מקומות במניין המצוות שמנה הרמב"ם ובשורש זין משורשה ועיין גם ברמב"ן בפרק א' מהלכות אישות הלכה י"ב ולקוחין אלו מצוות עשה הם. כתבה בראש המשנה שם בשם רבי אברהם בן הרמב"ם, וכיוון שהם התחלת הנישואין קרם מצווה, וכן הוא מתגייסה במדבר עמוד ב' לקדש הווה מצווה, שעיקר מצווה אחר כך שהיא הפריה ורבייה, והנאמר כיוון שהחלמת שבעה עממים הוא הכיבוש, והכיבוש לשם ישיבת הארץ הוא נאמר רק תחילת דבר במצווה בפני עצמה. Because once you destroy, okay, the 7 nations, you get rid of these 7 nations, that's the, what do you call, that's the intro to, what do you call, to settling the land. Otherwise, you wouldn't be getting rid of the 7 nations. So once you get rid of the 7 nations, you automatically settling the land is part of it. So it's all tied in. So you don't have to mention the end, because once you mention the beginning only purpose is the end. فحلقي مزباها المشاخين منها هم شباب إسرائيل يشوبا إن صريخ المتام في عصبة يشوب رأيتي بالسيف ابن مزباها حلق هذين سمان يد ألف ألف سمان يود ألف أوت كف دالت شكين كتاب عين شام بالعيال زي شحكار مزباطة حرامات شباع عمامين هي مزباطة شل كبوش بشباطة غارت مشكلة بيروشلمي برقباب دي شبيعيت في وشوع شلاح شالوش פירוש דמגאות וכולי. הרוצה להשלים ישלם, הרוצה לברוח יברח והרוצה להילחם יילחם. הרי שהם השלימו או ברחו הייתה מזוות החרימים מתקיימת. וכן אמרו שם, לחלק הגרגש לפני והלך לו. מזה נראה שעיקר מזוות החרמת 7 עמים הוא כיבוש הארץ, וכלשון הכתוב הורשתם את הארץ וישבתם בה, וכן נכבשה הארץ וכן יש להוכיח מהבראשית רבה, פרק מ"ד, שאמרו שם 10 עמים הם, והשלושה הובטח כיבושם לימות המשיח. והלא אז לימות המשיח אין עוד 3 עמים בעודם, שהרי כבר אבד זכרם ונבלבלו באומות, והאח יתקיים זה לימות המשיח, ובוודאי שהכוונה לא על העמים אלא על ארצם שתכבש, כמו שכן משמע גם כן מסנהדרין, כתוב רבי אומר 3 מצוות ישראל בכניסתם לארץ להעמיד להם מלך ולהפריץ זרעו של עמלק ואומר להם את הבחירה ולכאורה קשה של מלאגיה בחרמה שבעלמי ועודד הזה כבן נשי שפירושם לכניסתם לארץ לאחר ירושה וישיבה ובאמת הודחו בלשון כניסתם לא מוכח הכי ואומנם לפי דברנו ושם ולאומרש בכניסתם לארץ היא מפעם דבר בעיד שהיא יחידה דהיינו החרמה שבעלמין ומן האמר שלושם בזכות הסתברו ישראל פנים החרמתם 7 עמים ואפשר שגם לזה כתב ראשי וזה אם כן מוחד לכניסתם לארץ והחרמה זה 7 עמים. אחד המזבנים גז מאוד בהרמב"ם בפרק ה' בהלכות מלכים מוכיחים כן שכתב תחילה מלבד החרמה 7 עמים ודין מלחמת מזבח ואחר כך סיים בהלכות ישוע ישראל ויישובה. זה מוכיח שעניין ישוע ישראל ויישובה הם מחלקי המזבח של החרמה 7 עמים. So basically this whole time he's just proving the connection between החרמת 7 עמים, in other words the annihilation of these 7 nations is tied in to Yeshub Eretz Israel, and once you do the former, the latter automatically takes place, and therefore the latter, which is the Yeshub Eretz Israel, does not need to be mentioned. He was just trying to strengthen his case and show how that works. Okay. So basically he's going to go on and talk about the same thing over here now in the next 2 paragraphs about the opinion of Ramban versus Ramban, whether yes, no, or otherwise, and how it comes out. Okay, so we're going to skip the next 2 paragraphs. We're going to look at the next paragraph that starts on page Kof Peh, page 185, that starts with the bold letters of Me'ata. Okay, and he tells you Me'ata Neheze Anan. Because now we have to look and see if the mizvah of conquering the land is something that we should be doing in our day and time. Now Harambam mentions the annihilation of these 7 nations, even though their memory is long gone. We don't know do we know who they are? We have no idea. We read about them every day, when we say Ashashir, but Hittin, Yebusi, Girgashi. You know anybody in any Hittim or Yebusi or Kinaani? We don't know any of these nations anymore. She'abad zichram, their memory is even gone. Ve'ilu belavin, b'mizvo lo ta'aseh, de lo tehiyeh, okay? Shrach li ba'er. שאין מצווה זו נקשרת בזמן כיוון שאילו ישנה במציאות ישנו עליו הזה. ומלא כן כאן גם במצוות הסדר והחרם. נראה את ישראל עלי כרמב"ן שייך במצוות כיבוש ישראל, גם בזמן הזה מאת כל העם היושב עליה. So he says we have to look at the Ramban, and because the Ramban says that we have a mitzvah of conquering the land of Israel nowadays from any nation that is settled upon it. Anybody, doesn't make a difference who they are, we have to take it back, we have to conquer it. והיינו ודאי מטעם שכתב שעיקר מילות עשה והחרם היא כיבוש הארץ ולא החרמת השבעה הימים. Because the most important thing is not annihilating the nations, the most important thing is conquering the land and taking it back. שזה נפקא לן מלאו דלה תחיה, וזה דיוק נכון ואמיתי לעניות דעתי. אלא דקשה קושת מגילת אסתר, נזכר מהך לכתובות קוף יוד א', back to that same מסכת כתובות קוף יוד א', שלא יעלו בחומה, וכן ראיתי גם להרשב"ש, שם שכתב שבמצווה זו אינה כוללת לכל ישראל בגלות החל הזה, אבל היא נמנעת כלל. כמו שאמרו זכרן לברכה, בכתובות שלא ימהרו את הכס ולא יעלו כחומה ולא בני אפרים, מה קרה להם? שמיהרו את הכס, אך מצווה היא על כל יחיד לעלות לדור שם וכולי עד כאן דבריו. So he's saying that because of this swear, this oath that we have in Ketubot, we cannot speed up the end of times. We cannot just think that we can, take fate into our own hands. We still are held back by this shubu'ah that's in Masechet Ketubot. He's quoting this the Rashbish, okay? Bishimon Bar Sheshat. And even though we're held back by it, and so we as a nation cannot go and take over the land, he goes, that doesn't preclude us as individuals. As individuals, each and every one, should make aliyah and go settle there. ונראה שכיוון בזה לישי דברי זקנו הרמב"ן שכתב שנוהג בזמן הזה. למדו העלייה על כל יחיד לעלות לדור בישראל. מה שכתב בכתובות שלא יעלו כחומה, היינו כללות ישראל. אם כן, לפי דבריו, מה שכתב הרמב"ם, שם בעל הארץ, לא נניח אותה בידם ולא ביד זולתם מן הנוכרים בדור מהדורות, כי הרי נסתווינו בכיבוש כל הדורות. We should never leave, so this Rashbash is a grandson of the Ramban, and he's following in the footsteps of his grandfather, the Ramban, to take over the land. But he, obviously he fails, held back by the Gemara and Ketubot. They said, as long as we go up, okay, we're not going up as a nation going up to take over the land, but we're going up as individuals to settle there. That would automatically push the others out of the land. Because this is a different form of Milhamet Mizvah. We could do it by going up there and we're pushing them out, but without actually waging a war, it seems. שערי בן אפרים לא היו כלא ישראל, רק שבט אחד, והיה שם אומנם שבט אפרים לא היו של שבעת שש, לא יעלו החומה, עברו אלא שבועה שלא ידחקו את הכס, כמו שכתב בשיר השירים הבא, הפסוק השבעתי אתכם, וכולי. 4 שבועות השביען לישראל שלא ימרדו על המלכויות, ושלא ידחקו על הכס, ושלא יגלו מסתורין שלהם לאומות העולם, ושלא יעלו חומה מן הגבולה, 4 דורות דחקו על הכס, שלא כס. There's also this whole thing which I'm not familiar with, the whole midrash from Shir Hashirim Abba and the Gemara in Ketubot, which gets into more details of it. So I'm going to end over here. Okay, and I'm not even going to read the next two paragraphs because he's getting into what do you call it, different minutia that has nothing to do with our question. The question is, bottom line is, do we have a mitzvah of kibush in Israel? And ultimately, we see he's very clear that we definitely have a mitzvah of kibush in Israel. What is the kibush? How do we go about the kibush? There are different methods, different methodologies in the writings of the Hachamim, but ultimately, it's upon us to make sure that nobody is living in the land other than Am Yisrael. Whether we're talking about the Sheba Amamim, whether they're talking about the other three nations that are supposed to be pushed out at the time of the Mashiach, whether it's talking about other people that have come to settle the land because these Sheba Amamim are no longer known as to who they are, no matter what, we have to push everybody else out. We have to be there. As far as weaponry, ammunition, fighting techniques, army, absolutely. And that doesn't only apply to Israel, it applies to Am Yisrael, to individual Jews and collective Jews, any place and any time. And it must be part of the curriculum of every Talmud Torah and every yeshiva, and the Bnei Torah, as you want to call them that. Okay, not that he's using that term, but I'm using it so people today understand that people that are in the yeshivot, they're the ones that are supposed to be doing this because this is part of halakha. If the people studying Torah are not practicing halakha, then the Torah, bottom line, is worthless. The yeshivot Hesder, God bless them, they're doing the right thing. They study Torah and they put it into effective action, and they are also Mekadesh Shem Hashem. They bring Kiddush Hashem every action that they do. The people see that these people love Eretz Israel. They see that they study the Torah. They follow the mitzvot, mitzvot aseh, mitzvot lo ta'aseh, mitzvot ben adam makom, mitzvot ben adam habero, and mitzvot hatiluyot ba'aris, and they are out there fighting for the land. They follow the laws and the dictates of the government. Everything they're doing follows exactly what Rabbi Yaaqob Moshe Toledano already told us to do way before we heard of the Holocaust and way before we had, the miraculous state of Israel that we have to thank for Hashem for every day of our lives. I think the message is crystal clear. We have to take an active part in doing what Rabbi Toledano has told us, and we have to support. If we cannot do it, at least we have to support those that are doing it. Any further comments?
Have you ever encountered the opposite opinion, though, that it's a mitzvah to turn the cheek and get hit again? Because remember, he had two questions at the beginning. One was Eretz Yisrael, and one was lifting one's head.
Right. So it was. I don't think it was a question. I think he was complaining about what he's seeing and hearing and how it developed over time.
Right. How did that develop, though? I mean, what are sources for that?
That's a great question. He seems to point, very clearly to France, Germany, and Russia as being the root of that. And my guess is that it's very possible it came from a Christian mindset. As we know, Jews always pick up on, the teachings going on around them. And when they see that the Christian church was, again, I'm just making this up right now on the spot that I could be completely off base. But I think from what I know of Christian history, the Christian church was very, very strong, stronger than the governments that it was actually located within. And we see that for sure in the case of the Vatican, but we see it throughout Europe. that the church was so strong that if they told the people you can't do something, they also dictated to the governments what they could and couldn't do. They dictated to the governments when to go to war, when not to go to war, when to defend, when not to defend. Obviously, we know, they had their own army in the form of a people's army, the Crusades, okay, which gathered up Christians, religious Christians, if you will, from throughout Europe, to create an army, led by quote unquote God, to go and wipe out the infidels from from the Holy Land. So obviously they were the rulers, and that means that as Christians, religious Christians, being the ruling party, both as far as religion and as far as military, the Jews felt that they had to put down their head, because if they dared open their head, if they dared lift their head, it would be chopped off. And I think, once the Crusades came about, I don't think it happened before the Crusades. So think about, we're talking about, let's say from approximately from the year 1000 to about 1300. Okay, that 300-year window, maybe a little bit less, with the Crusades being so strong and so mighty, and just coming in and ravaging, not only communities, but towns, and villages, and even cities. And it didn't make a difference, Jewish or not Jewish. They were, they did what they want. Everybody was afraid at that point. They instilled a fear in the people that you witnessed with your own eyes. You saw the bloodshed. You didn't dare do anything differently. And once that happened, so the rabbis, I would guess, told you, listen, you don't want to put yourself in danger, you better hide. Lower your head, take a low profile, and that's it. And then, over the course of this 250-year period, it became ingrained. Don't you dare think of fighting back. Don't dare lift a sword, or don't even lift a shovel at them, because they will kill you, and they will kill everybody around you and everybody connected to you, and they will burn down your house, they'll rape your wife and children, and that's it. So stay out of trouble and let them do what they want, and maybe they'll leave you alone. I think that's how it felt. Again, just a thought that I'm making up on the spot.
I think you're right.
That's it though. Anyway, any other points, or I think we're done for the evening. But I think this definitely connects to Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut.
Beautiful shiur.
If we had this information available to every Jew in every place at 1930, by 1939, when things were really bad, I think everybody would have fought back. Unfortunately, hopefully we don't make the same mistake and not learn from it. We're stuck here in New York where we have no ammo, we can't do anything. But we need to figure something out.
Great
Rabbi,
Great
what do you have down for us in Atlanta? You have anything?
Well, we have the amendment. We have the amendment to raise arms.
Okay, maybe we'll have to move to Georgia.
It's a great shiur, by the way. What a great shiur, and it brings tears to your eyes.
It does. It does. There's a lot here, a lot to soak in, a lot to take to heart, and it's it's not even 100 years ago, and how the world has gone through so much in the span of 90 years from when this was written and published till today. We have so many life lessons to gain from it. I hope we can all review it and share it with others. And that's it.
Great shiur. Wow.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joey.
Thanks a lot.
Good night.
All
right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.